Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another edition of Friday Night Live on Friday, the 4th of October, 2024. I'm your host, Abdul Akbar, and we're beaming out to the good people of Luton and surrounding areas tonight, and also to the good people of Sheffield, Nottingham, Derby, Peterborough, and the Midlands through our partner stations across the nation. Welcome to all of you, of course, on the back of the Israeli attack on Lebanon, Gaza, and surrounding areas. And of course, Iran is now within the mix. We're doing a 2-hour special on tonight's program where we're getting experts on the line just to really analyze and digest what exactly is going on. I can't believe what's going on. It is absolute chaos in the Middle East right now. And we're hearing about death after death of innocent civilians. And now we're hearing reports that Israel is warning rescue workers against going into strike-hit areas. Can you believe that? Even rescue workers are not safe from Israel. And here's the latest coming out of BBC Arabic right now. And I kid you not, this is actually on the BBC News website from BBC Arabic, specifically saying a very, very strange thing for any government or any country. They're saying Israel has threatened to strike Lebanese search and rescue teams if they go to the southern suburbs of Beirut to help those trapped under the rubble, according to Lebanon's civil defense. I can't believe what's going on. So you know what? First of all, you don't expect to be bombed if you're Lebanon, and you are bombed. And then when you send out a humanitarian group of people like search and rescue teams to help people, presumably civilians who have been injured, you're told by the offending body that, hey, if you happen to go down there, we're going to strike you and we're going to strike your specific teams. This is exactly what's being quoted on the BBC website. I do not kid you. You couldn't make any of this stuff up. It is very, very concerning stuff that we're seeing unfold, sadly, in the Middle East. But we're going to be covering this topic and more. I want your reactions as well at 01582 481 822. I've got an excellent panel of guests that I want to go straight on the line to get their reactions and also where they think this conflict is going to next. Because ultimately, listeners, I've been speaking to many of you over the past week. I know everyone, whether you're Muslim, non-Muslim, just a human. You cannot be human if you are not affected by what's going on for either side of this particular conflict. I've got to say, I've been watching a lot of the YouTubers out there coming up with their various rhetoric on either side. But I've got to say on this one, it's very hard to really look at this situation and wonder what on earth is the Israeli government up to and what is their strategy and when will they feel safe? Because it seems to me that actually until Israel or the government of Israel claims to feel safe, nobody is going to be safe. That's the kind of situation I feel that we're in. That until they say that we still have people around us, bodies around us, organizations around us, terrorist groups, resistance groups, whatever you want to call them, Hezbollah, Hamas, the government of Iran, the Lebanese government, whatever you want to call these bodies around Israel, it seems like that's the current rhetoric coming out of Benjamin Netanyahu's government is that we are not safe, we have a right to defend ourselves, and therefore we shall go in preemptively. What's really strange as well, and I'm going to ask my guests about this in a moment, and I'm going to introduce them in a very brief moment, is it's strange how the Israeli government has gone on and attacked parts of Lebanon, and we've seen specific attacks in central Beirut as well, which is a massive escalation. And there's hardly any strong condemnation or rhetoric coming out of the United States or even the British government or even any of the European governments. But when Iran retaliates, and I'm going to call it that, to me it seems like a retaliation rather than an action that Iran has actually kicked off by itself unilaterally. It's a retaliation. When they sent those some 180 rockets into Tel Aviv, a place that I've been to. It's a lovely place and very concerning. I know people that actually live in Tel Aviv. I have former colleagues that live there as well. I was concerned for their safety, as I have been concerned for the safety of all the humans affected by this terrible conflict, which frankly has predated the 7th of October, which incidentally, the anniversary is just in a few days' time. Well, listen, enough of me. Let's go to some of our guests on the line right now. We're going to be going to Adam Shapiro. He's no stranger to this program. Lovely to see him as well. He's a long-time Palestine solidarity activist. I'd love to get his perspectives on this. We're also going to go to Youssef Rappaport, who is a professor of history of Islam at the School of History at Queen Mary, University of London. And personally, I'm an alumni of Queen Mary, albeit not of history, but of computer science. And also, we're going to a commentator of this program as well, Basharat Ali. He's going to be joining us as well and sharing his perspectives. He's a television host and a Khatib. So, Adam, let me start with you, if I may. And good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, gentlemen. Delighted to have you on this program, albeit on the backdrop of, dare I say, a massively escalating conflict that's quickly could potentially spiral out of control. Adam, first of all, your reactions to what you've been seeing over the last few days. What's going on in your mind?
Thank you for having me and having me join the program again. It's always a pleasure, and appreciate your continued coverage of this of the situation in Palestine and now in Lebanon. What I think we're seeing is the way I look at it and the way I'm trying to sort of assess what's happening is to look at the whole picture, not just what's happening only in Lebanon, not just what's happening only in Gaza, and also not just what's happening only in the West Bank. I think we have to look at actually all three places, because I think what we're seeing is the strategy that Netanyahu has been pursuing and this government has been really pursuing all along. I don't think it's about taking out an armed group or a terrorist group or a political ideology. I don't think it's about getting safety for Israeli citizens. I think what it is about is territorial expansion at this point. What we've seen in Gaza, the widespread destruction, the utter devastation of entire cities, neighborhoods, and the emptying of the space, along with some of the other logistical moves that the Israeli military is doing to carve up Gaza, I think is intended to depopulate part of the territory of Palestinians in order to allow Israeli settlers to go in and take it over. In the West Bank, this has been a process that's been ongoing for a very long time, but is escalating over the last 2 years, whereby entire Palestinian villages have been forcibly expelled or, attacked so much that people effectively, pick up and flee, and settlers move in their wake. And now in Lebanon, the speculation, of course, is that with this ground invasion happening, and it's interesting to note how it's happening. It's not happening like it did in 2006 or even before in earlier operations, which were more lightning efforts to get up to the Litani River as quickly as possible and then exert control. Here, the Israeli army seems to be taking it meter by meter, almost, taking it slowly, step by step, pushing everybody out, getting the forces and that are resisting there out. And I believe what will ultimately come is that the army will try to get up to the Litani River and then have basically an empty territory at that point. We've already seen Israeli officials sharing maps of the region where Israel's borders, as we know them, don't exist anymore. And all of a sudden, there are Hebrew names in southern Lebanon.
It's interesting because Benjamin Netanyahu, when he was in the UN last week, he actually showed a map, right? And he showed the dark side and the light side. I can't remember what he called it, but he used like terminology. I actually thought it was a pretty good pitch and a presentation. Of course, Benjamin Netanyahu is no stranger to presenting at the UN. He's done it for over a decade, and he does a very good speech when he's there, regardless of what side you're on. Just critically looking at his speaking ability, but nonetheless, of course, most of the council was not sitting in there because they boycotted his speech, which also speaks dividends. Let me come back to you in a second, Adam, for more analysis on the expansion plans in Israel. But really interesting point. Let me go to Yossi Rappaport, also known as Youssef as well. I'll call you Yossi since that's the name you put in yourself. Yossi, if I may, you're a professor of history of Islam at the School of History at Queen Mary, University of London. Let me ask you this, Yossi, what's going through your mind, and if I dare I say, can I touch on your knowledge of the history of Palestine in pre-modern periods, and also the Balfour Declaration and how this is panning out just from a historical point of view? Is this unprecedented to see this level of destruction, for example, in Lebanon? Is it beyond what we've seen in the past? Certainly Gaza, as Adam mentioned, has basically been flattened. What say you? What are you talking to your students about as well at QM? Ooh, I can't hear Yossi. I don't know if the producers can. Hopefully, we can get you your sound sorted out. Try and unmute you as well. All right, Yossi, if you try to unmute yourself, maybe we can get your sound back. Okay, I just heard something there, potentially. No, not yet. Give me a second while
Thank you very much.
How was that? I can hear you clearly. Go for it, Yossi. Back to you. Yes.
Thank you very much for having. Sorry about that. These are very, very sad days for all of us. This is a very sad day for anyone who is Israeli, who sees this government doing these crimes and this killing indiscriminate. So thanks for having me. I really want to appreciate what Adam just said. I think this is a broader conflict, exactly that, as you say, historically we are looking at a process that does go back to colonial times. It is a colonial process. This war started because there is a Jewish minority between the river and the sea who brutally oppress a Palestinian majority, and their aim is the aim of this government, as it has been in 48, is to leave as few Palestinians on the land as possible. So I don't know if necessarily they will settle everywhere. Maybe in Lebanon as well, I don't know, maybe in northern Gaza, but even if they don't, what matters is continuing the system of domination, which is a colonial system of domination. So the Balfour Declaration was bringing people who were persecuted, who were rejected in Europe, and exporting them to somewhere else where they will serve the interest of Britain then and now in the West more generally. And this has worked. This has worked fine, but the solidarity of Muslims and others around the world, including in this case Iran, which I may not agree with everything it does, but and as well as many other actors, is pushing back, and that's what creates this violent conflict. So as a historian, I think this method of war is in itself a method that goes back to colonial times. So if you look at Amritsar in 1919, or you look at massacres committed by colonial forces, this is the outlook. This is the same outlook that belongs really to the late 19th century and early 20th century. And that is what is so difficult for me to see people I know, Israelis who are on in everyday life, nice people, supporting this colonial outlook in which there's complete dehumanization of the other.
Yeah, I hear that. Yossi, stay there. Thanks for sharing that perspective. Very, very, very sad situation, as you mentioned, even historically as well. Let me go to Bashar Ali, who's on the line as well, commentator on this program, and no stranger as well. Bashar, we saw Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei also talk today after the Jummah prayers, where, you know, he said that Iran's missile strikes on Israel were correct, logical, and lawful. What's your interpretation of the Ayatollah Khamenei's speech today? It's very rare to see him come out and lead the Friday prayers like this. I think the last time he did that was some 4 or 5 years ago. And what was quite striking about the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei speech in this vast crowd in Tehran today, during the Jummah prayers, the Friday prayers, was that everyone in government was also sitting in the front row of that speech, almost giving Israel a kind of, two-finger salute, saying, listen, you can threaten us all you like. We're going to be out here downtown in Tehran, and we're going to be listening to this speech, and there's nothing you can do about it. And they were all sitting there, including the president of Iran. It was quite a sight to see as I watched it live via a major broadcaster's feed on YouTube this morning. Basharat, your response to what's going on right now? Don't know if we can hear you. Let me unmute you. I hope our production team can wake up. Basharat, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
All right, great. We can hear you loud and clear. Go for it. Your response.
Super. Thank you. Just echoing what the other contributors have said, a couple of points. First of all, it's Ali Khamenei. I don't want to say Khomeini. Khomeini has gone long gone. The names are very similar. Look, it's not unexpected. When faced with what's going on in Lebanon, and Hassan Nasrallah and Hezbollah were created by Iran, backed by Iran, and funded by Iran, and they have a local presence. Hezbollah is a part of the mosaic of what is the politics of Lebanon, and that was as a consequence of the 1982 invasion of Lebanon by Sharon and the butcher of Sabra and Shatila. So it's not surprising that the Iranians will want to portray that they're striking back, because effectively Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon is what Israel is to America. It is a conduit. And I think what Yossi was saying, just to echo that, Ronald Storrs, who was the first British mandated governor of Jerusalem after Allenby conquered Jerusalem in 1917, he said, quote, "We need our own little Ulster in the Middle East, in this sea of Arabs." Of course, those of us who are familiar with that means Ulster was effectively depopulating of the Catholics in the north of Ireland and bringing in Protestants or non-Catholics to effectively become the equivalent of Zionism in Palestine. And once America effectively booted out Britain after the Suez Crisis and firmly took its grip after Anthony Eden and I forget the French Prime Minister's name, when they tried to launch the war in Egypt to counteract American interests, we are now facing American proxies operating in Lebanon. And Zionism is effectively Jabotinsky and the Judenstaat, what was his name? I forget the name of the founder of Zionism. It's gone out of my head for a moment. He wrote the Judenstaat. They set it out that they would depopulate, and Greater Israel, or Greater Eretz, is a part of the project. But ultimately, look, it comes down to this. America has the influence. And without the American nod, this does not happen. American Marines were in Beirut in the 1950s when American interests were threatened by the then Soviet Union. So it's all about geopolitical interests. And what I see at the moment is American barbarity and savagery being endorsed through the face of Israel. And so ultimately, where does this go? It's as far as America wants it to go, because America controls what Israel can do. It funds it. Without American funding, without political backing, and without American control of the Arab regimes. You haven't mentioned the Arab regimes. If I can conclude by this, Israel is the soul of Europe, the body of America, and the shadow of the Arab regimes. All three of these come together to tell you what is Israel. And effectively, all three of these entities are backing Israel. The Arab regimes, they may come out with all sorts of bellicose rubbish, which is absolute trite, but without them, none of this would happen.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Bashar. Thanks for sharing that. And I like your analogy about the soul, body, and the shadows. And I can see Yossi and Adam nodding their heads as well. They're probably going to use that one later on as well. Who knows? But Adam, let me go back to you, if I may, which specifically is about the American part or intervention or endorsement or ignorance, whatever. I don't know, because when you look at the television pictures, you look at this very old man who's, you know, a lame duck president, let's face it, right? He's going to be leaving the White House in roughly a month's time, and someone is going to replace him, either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. I'm a firm believer of the fact that it doesn't matter actually who's in power, no matter how interesting Kamala Harris is and how pro-Palestinian she sounds, etc. Ultimately, American foreign policy is going to be American foreign policy, whoever's actually at the helm. Nonetheless, I mean, you see what the Americans are saying, and they're pleading ignorance on some of the things and the actions that Israel is taking. And they've completely ignored, the Israelis have completely ignored the American guidance around Gaza, around Lebanon so far. And it sounds like they're going to ignore American guidance when it comes to their response to the Iranian missile attack just a few days ago. Biden just has made a mess, has potentially made things worse. Who knows? But do you believe it when the U.S. administration say, listen, we're trying our best, we're doing what we can? They're repeating this narrative of, a ceasefire. Everyone's saying ceasefire. No one seems to be listening. Israel can basically do whatever it likes. And the Americans are effectively not asserting the power and the negotiation force they potentially have over Benjamin Netanyahu.
No, I mean, your analysis is spot on. I think we have to understand U.S. foreign policy at this point, and has been this way for some time now, as the support for Israel and acceptance of however Israel wants to frame whatever political military action it takes, as it's become a tenet of American foreign policy to just basically agree and to some extent provide cover. The idea that the United States is making a decision at this point or choosing to support Israel, I think is actually incorrect, because at this point it's not even a choice anymore. The system is set up such that between the influence of the different lobbies, the money that's at stake when it comes to weapons, military industrial complex, the factor of how elections are organized and operated in this country, and how dependent they are on funding. All of that leads to a situation in which, on this issue, the United States doesn't make policy. It is very much the old idea of the tail wagging the dog in that sense. Israel dictates American policy on anything to do with Israel. And I think we have to understand that if we want to understand, one, as you are correct, there will be no difference in terms of the White House, in terms of who's in there, in terms of things getting better. I do think there could be a potential difference in terms of things getting worse. I can't imagine a scenario where things can get way, way worse with one choice versus the other, but it's not to say that it's going to get better with either of them. So this is where we are as the United States, and in some ways it serves American interests, certainly the corporate interest I was talking about, other types of interests that politicians have. But does it serve United States interests in terms of the globe, its interest globally, its interest in terms of global economy, its interest in terms of the environment? I mean, we could come up with all kinds of ways that this doesn't serve the United States interest, but because it's a tenet, a matter of faith at this point, it's not something you can reason with. It's not something you can apply rationality to. And that's scary. That in a sense makes it just like a theocratic approach when it comes to this specific issue. And when it comes to that, it makes it almost impossible to imagine doing something differently.
Very interesting. Well, listen, let me go ahead and thank you, Adam Shapiro and Bashar Ali, for joining us on this crucial moment, I would say, in Middle Eastern history. It could be argued. I think we're about to see some interesting days ahead, and we're going to be wondering whether this spirals out of control, because this is turning into a much larger regional escalation especially with the Iranian attack on Tel Aviv. Now everyone's waiting for the Israeli response. What is that going to look like? Where's that going to be? Will they attack nuclear infrastructure? Probably not. Will they attack Iran's major oil infrastructure? Potentially. What's going to happen next? To be continued. We're going to continue with Yossi Rappaport after this break. So Yossi, stay on the line. But let me go ahead and thank Adam Shapiro. Thank you, Adam, and Bashar Ali for their time this evening.
Thank you.
All right, listeners,
Thank
this
you
is
very
Friday
much.
Night Live. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, listeners, this is Friday Night Live with me, Abdul Akbar, and the rest of you. Delighted to have everyone tuning in right now. We've got a lot of listeners, and you're sending us your reactions as well. Grateful for that. We are going to be taking a short break, but coming up after the break, we're continuing with the Professor of History of Islam at the School of History at Queen Mary University, and also joining me is Nicola Pratt, a Professor of the International Politics at the University of Warwick. So don't go away for that. Friday Night Live. We'll be right back after these messages.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1 FM.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
On the authority of An-Nawas ibn Saman, may Allah be pleased with him, that the Prophet, may the blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, said, righteousness is good morality, and wrongdoing is that which wavers in your soul, and which you dislike people finding out about. It was related by Muslim.
A large and elegant wedding and events venue in the heart of Luton, catering for up to 1,200 guests, with a 5-star food hygiene rating, plenty of parking, bridal suite, family rooms and prayer facilities. Crescent Hall's the perfect venue for your wedding, events, parties and conferences. We have some great offers for summer. Contact us to find out more. Call 01582 723386. Email bookings@crescenthall.co.uk or search for us online and social media. Crescent Hall, Luton. Conditions apply.
Landlords, let us take away the hassle of letting your property. Our comprehensive services include tenant vetting, rent collection and service charges, maintenance and repairs. Ideal Properties has 2 branches and have been established over 20 years and have gained a wealth of knowledge and experience.
If you are thinking of selling or letting your property, then speak to a member of our knowledgeable team about a free, no-obligation market appraisal.
We can also offer guaranteed rental income.
Contact us on either Luton 721110 or 696050. Ideal Properties. Service with a smile, whatever your needs.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sheikh Hafs Al-Ghazi.
My name is Julian Bond.
My name is Nazil Azami.
My name is Nizam.
This is Naeem Raza.
My name is Ridwana Walislahan.
My name is Suhaib.
My name is Musharraf Hussain.
My name is Shamshid Zaman. This is Raheem Jung.
This is Lauren Booth.
This is Dr. Munir.
My name is Fahad Matin.
My name is Mushtaq Hoyas.
This is Atiq Malik. My name is Imran Khan.
My name is Dawood Masood.
My name is Moon. Keep listening to Inspire on 105.1 FM.
AK Windows South Limited, manufacturers and installers of high-quality UPVC windows and doors, bifold doors, composite doors, conservatories, porches, skypods, fascias, guttering, and much, much more. We specialize in double glazing and triple glazing using the best German profile. If you want quality at affordable prices, AK Windows is the place to go. If your house needs a facelift, you know who to trust. For a free quote, call AK Windows today on 01582 483 777 or visit us at Unit 10E, Britannia Estate, Leagrave Road, Luton.
It doesn't take much to bring some difference. You give some change, which makes a change. Because nothing gets mileage like a charity. Just a little change turns into a chain. And before we know it, the results are massive. So give a little to make a big difference. For donations, call now. UKIM 0207 387 2157.
इस्लामी नुक्ता निगाह से इल्मी और फिक्री मौज़ूआत का जायजा, इस्लाम की इंसानियत साज़ तालीमात का ख्याल अफरोज़ तज़किरा, रवादारी और बक़ाए बाहमी क़ज़ामिन, फ़िक्र व नज़र की तत्हीर और अख़लाक़ी बालीदगी पर मबनी मौज़ूआत पर ताक़ीकी गुफ्तगू, वक़्त, हालात और माहौल के तकाज़ों के मुताबिक समाजी इस्लाह क़ज़ामिन। सुनते रहिए और सवालात पूछिए। इंस्पायर FM पर प्रोग्राम सदाए तकदीर हर बुध दिन 11 बजे प्रोफेसर मसूद अख्तर आजादी के साथ।
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 6:30.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to part 2 of tonight's edition of Friday Night Live on Friday, the 4th of October, 2024. I'm your host, Abdul Akbar, beaming out to the good people of Luton House Rangers tonight, and also to the good people of Sheffield, Nottingham, Derby, Peterborough, and the Midlands through our partner stations across the nation. So welcome to all of you. Wow, what a week it has been. It feels like to me, I don't know about you guys, but it feels like to me World War III is definitely around the corner. I'm going to be stocking up at the local Costco with some dry foods. No, I'm kidding. It's not that bad. But you know what? Anything can happen right now, and I'm a little bit worried. Remember that toilet paper crisis that we had during COVID and everyone was fighting over toilet paper? I'm just hoping nothing kicks off where I have to go down to the local, I don't know, Aldi's or Lidl and start to ration on toilet paper. Look at me. There's a World War III about to kick off, and I'm worrying about my hygiene habits. That's how bad the situation has become for me personally. But anyway, listeners, I'm laughing, but there's some serious stuff going down in the Middle East, and I'm sure you are privy to the horrible pictures on the news, especially, yes, we have seen the horrible pictures as of Gaza and the situation with regard to Gaza over the last few months, almost a year now since the 7th of October. But I hate it when everyone uses this milestone of 7th of October, which is when a bunch of nutcases from Hamas went in and attacked a bunch of Israelis. However, as we all know, anyone who's sane and rational will know that this situation has been going on well before the 7th of October. In fact, the oppression of the Palestinian people, and more importantly, the occupation, could be argued, has been going on for decades. So this isn't an isolated incident, but it was a trigger point. 7th of October, according to the Israeli government, was the largest attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust. This is what they say. This is the claim they make. Now, whether you want to dispute that claim or not, that's up to you. But it definitely was a significant escalation from an Israeli government perspective, where lots of things went wrong. What was interesting is I saw an interview of the new leader of Hamas, and he was very, very interesting. He had a really good interview a couple of days ago with Jeremy Bowen, the BBC veteran reporter, and Jeremy Bowen asked him some pretty tough questions. And I know the BBC gets a lot of slack from the Israeli lobby about being very pro-Palestinian and very anti-Zionist. I'm not so sure about that, because I did think Jeremy Bowen gave a good interview there when he spoke to the current standing-in leader of Hamas and said, listen, you guys went in and you killed innocent civilians. You did things to the women and children that were against the rules of war. And the Hamas leader, the interim leader for Hamas, he basically said, listen, we told our people to go in and attack military targets as per the rules of war and the rules of attack. We did not want our people to go in and attack civilians. In fact, our people were having cups of tea and stuff. So I found that very strange. I also find some of the Israeli claims very strange. Who do you believe? It's very hard to say. But often when people are occupied for such a long time, they will resort to things, especially if they feel they're not being heard or getting the attention they need. They will resort to things that you and I or no sane person would agree with, that maybe they wouldn't do under normal circumstances. That was the excuse and the viewpoint of the Hamas interim leader. What say you? 01582 481 822. 7th of October, yes, it happened. It's coming up to 1 year, just 3 days away. Where do we go from here? And is this escalation now within Beirut something that's going to cause and trigger a wider series of events? Well, 01582 481 822. I'm not holding my breath for anything getting a bit more peaceful anytime soon. But I've got a couple of wonderful guests who know a lot more about this topic and certainly have an opinion on this topic. We're back with Yusuf or Yossi Rappaport, Professor of History of Islam at the School of History at QM University of London. And I'm delighted to welcome to this part of the program Nicola Pratt, who's a Professor of the International Politics of the Middle East at the University of Warwick. Nicola, what a wonderful set of information and knowledge to have for this specific period of the events calendar, right?
Yes. Well, although sometimes not everybody appreciates having a deep historical perspective on the Middle East. Some people would like to just focus on what's happening on the here and now and ignore the decades of oppression and violence that happened before.
Interesting. Nicola, I want to draw on that in a moment, but let me go to Yossi Rappaport before I do that. And Nicola, I'm going to come to you and ask you about that historical, factual information. And we're really lucky to have you today from your vantage point as well. Yossi, going back to what's happening, and one of the things that you've done is you've looked at a lot of the history of Palestine, even the thoughts of the historical scholar Ibn Taymiyyah. So lots going on there, and I want to draw on that in a moment. But we're about to take a very short break because, as you know, we are a community radio station, and the call to prayer is about to kick off in this particular part of the world. So just stay with me because we're going to quickly take a short interval for the call to prayer, which I'm told I've already missed, and we'll be right back after these very brief messages.
أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
All right, we're back after that very short interval there. Thank you to my guests for waiting on the line. Let me go straight to Yossi. Yossi, one of the things I didn't mention as well, and you've been very humble about it, is that you were born and raised in Israel, and where you did a lot of your undergraduate and postgraduate studies as well. So you're coming in from a really interesting angle for all of us. So back to you. Oh, I can't hear you again. Sorry about that. The sound is not coming through from your end. Hopefully we can get that connection sorted. Try one more time. Oh, not yet. No, can't hear you still. No, not yet. We're just going to mute you and unmute you and try again. Sorry about that, listeners. We're going to try and get Yossi's sound sorted out. Let's try that one more time. Yossi, back to you. So we unmute you. Yeah.
Can you hear me, Abdullah?
Yes, I can. That's better. Thank you so much. Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you for this. I think what Adam said before was really interesting about Israel wagging Israel being the tail. And I think that what we see within Israel is also interesting, because yes, government and this regime, I would say, wants to have as a few Palestinians on the land as possible, and to repress brutally and have a continuous war. But will that appeal to the Israeli middle class? Will Israelis want to live in such a place for a long time? What Netanyahu is now offering is a war without end, a Sparta-like country. And he is perhaps fantasizing, yes, about a regime change in Iran, and I don't. Clearly, this is what he wants to happen. I don't know. This is such a folly that he may be stopped before that. But what prospect is there for young Israelis, middle-class Israelis? What prospect is there for the economy of Israel for the long term? So this is there are internal contradictions in this project. If Israel, as Bashar said before, has the soul of Europe, the people of Israel want to live like Europeans. They don't want to live in a constant garrison. And this is something that is a weakness for Israel, and something that perhaps we can build on to create bridges, because Israelis and Palestinians, you've been there, are living next to each other, have a lot of interactions, daily life, that are not violent. So we always try to be a bit optimistic.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I value the optimism. And what's interesting is, when you speak to ordinary Israeli people, they have a lot in common with their Arab neighbors, and they're a wonderful people, I would say, the Israeli people as well, and just as though the Arab people are wonderful people. Unfortunately, the politicians and the government are a different story altogether. And I think that's what we're navigating here. But let me go to our other guest on the line right now. Delighted to welcome to this program Nicola Pratt. As I mentioned, she's a professor of the international politics of the Middle East at the University of Warwick. Nicola, thanks for joining us once again this evening on Friday Night Live and giving us a bit of your start to your weekend. If I may ask, what's your current interpretation of what's going on? But I would love to dwell on the history as well, and your interpretation and analysis of what led us here. And that's a loaded question. There's a lot to dissect and analyze, and if you can stick to my layperson's vantage point as well, and try to break it down for me if you can.
Yeah, so I think when we're talking about the situation in Israel-Palestine, often people bandy around the phrase "it's complicated," and that can actually be a way of turning people off the topic or closing down discussion. In some ways, it's not that complicated. There was a historical injustice in which Palestinians were prevented from self-determination and independence in their homeland by the creation of the State of Israel. And whilst there are, also historical reasons why many Jewish people see the State of Israel as a positive thing, as something that is a protection for them. Nonetheless, that state was created at the expense of the Palestinian people who had been living in that land for hundreds of years. So up until now, Palestinians still don't have self-determination. This is a historical injustice that's been going on for over 100 years, and until Palestinians do have that a free and independent state, there won't be peace in the Middle East, because people who are not free, people who are oppressed are. But I think the Israeli government has consistently over time thought that if they strike back hard enough, they can stop people from rising up and demanding freedom. And they thought that they had done that in previous decades against the PLO, what have you, and you know, after the PLO became irrelevant, Hamas emerged as an actor in the Palestinian scene. So Israel's falling. The Israeli government and Israeli citizens are fooling themselves if they think that there is a military solution to the situation of the Palestinians. The Palestinians deserve freedom and self-determination like any other people.
Absolutely.
So yeah, until that's solved, and that's also obviously the contributing reason to why the Hamas attacks took place a year ago. It's the reason why Hezbollah is aiding Hamas, or it's a related reason. You know, it's not that people just hate Israel for some irrational reason. The reason is to do with this historical injustice.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nicola, thank you for putting it like that. And I completely agree with you. This is actually a very simple matter, right? Especially if you look at the history. It isn't complicated. I think it even potentially goes back to the beginning of the Balfour Declaration, and when this whole thing kicked off and that decision was made, and then everything else revolved around that. I fully agree with you when you say that still the Palestinian people don't have that right to determine their own future, and they're almost, you know, people have described it, and organizations have described Gaza as the world's largest open air prison. Right now, it's probably the world's largest pile of rubble, because infrastructurally everything's been demolished. I've never seen a conflict, at least in my age, over the years, where you know, so-called governments that claim to be democratic and fair and applying the rules of war in their offensive action have actually bombed schools and hospitals. That to me is unprecedented. But here's the thing: when you speak to an Israeli government spokesman, I've never spoken to one, but I've definitely heard them give interviews. They say, listen, we're fighting a unique enemy here. And they're saying the same thing about Hezbollah as well, not just about Hamas, where they use civilians as human shields, and these so-called terrorist organizations / resistance groups, they have actually intentionally set up their infrastructure so as to ensure that they are protected by human shield. That's a really interesting dynamic. But I was actually looking at my visit to Tel Aviv, and I've been to Tel Aviv several times over the last decade, and I've had a chance to go to Jerusalem as well. And I will say that in Tel Aviv, there's actually military infrastructure within civilian populations as well. I'll give you an example. The actual headquarters of Mossad, I remember I was actually in one of the high-rise skyscrapers in downtown Tel Aviv, and I was just standing by the window and taking a selfie, and I was called by one of my work colleagues saying, listen, don't take a selfie here, because right behind you is a very confidential building. I was like, oh, really? And then, you know, we had a chat afterwards, and I realized it was the headquarters of Mossad. So, you know, there's also similar kind of infrastructure, albeit an open secret amongst Israelis, that there are sensitive sites within Tel Aviv as well, which is a heavily populated area. So I think this argument around using civilians as human shields is a little bit far-fetched, though it is true that in some cases that might be the case. I'm not sure if that's an intentional strategy or not. But Nicola, let me ask you this question, if I may, especially given your awareness and, you know, holistic awareness of the politics of the Middle East. What about the Arab nations? Because a lot of people are looking at this thinking, hey, if you look at Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, I mean, these countries seem to be taking a back foot. They're just kind of watching this unfold. Of course, we have the sectarian division as well between the Sunni majority Arab countries and then the Shia majority nations like Iran and Lebanon. This is and even Iraq. What's happening here from your vantage point? And do you think the Arab countries are doing enough in terms of their clout, if any, in the region, or are they just sitting back and letting Israel effectively do their work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can I just say something very quickly about human shields? That is really, it really annoys me that this is never interrogated more by the media, even if Hamas was using civilians as human shields. And I must also say that actually there's lots of video evidence of Israeli soldiers using Palestinians as human shields in the occupied territories. But even if that's the case, that doesn't give you the right to bomb the civilians. Like in international law, that's very clear, like military, like the targeting of civilians, there has to be a military objective that's justifiable in relation to the number of civilians killed. And we just have not seen that. So that human shield excuse does not cut it.
And just to extend on that, Nicola, I know I'm going to go on to the other point about Arab nations in a second, but you make a really powerful point, because the other thing that's kind of connected to that is the Israeli government will say, well, we're using precision weaponry here. We're using high-tech weaponry that's really precise. The wording they use is surgical, right? That's the current buzzword at the moment when it comes to this kind of conflict. And that really worries me, because I don't think any kind of surgical strike is going to hit military infrastructure, especially if there's a school right on top of it, or in the way, or a hospital. I thought that they wouldn't take this to Lebanon and Beirut, but they're doing that in Beirut now as well. So it's not just a one-time kind of strategy. This is happening further away as well. That's the real worrying thing. But let's go back to the Arab states and their response and your interpretation.
Yeah. So yes, the Arab states are conspicuous by their absence. There's a lot of, in some cases, there's some very, rhetorical support for the Palestinians and condemnation of what Israel is doing by foreign ministers and presidents in various Arab countries, particularly just the other week at the UN, the foreign minister of Jordan gave a very strong condemnation of of Israel's continued assault on the Gaza Strip and the extension of that to Lebanon. However, in terms of actions, they could do a lot, right? They could, for example, put a boycott on commercial boycott on Israel. Even like Turkey actually also is a good example. Like Erdogan has been very vocal, yet Turkey is still selling oil, as far as I understand, still selling oil to Israel. Jordan is still selling agricultural foodstuffs to Israel. So Israel is not feeling any isolation, unlike Gaza, which is under siege. It's under a aid, hardly any humanitarian aid is getting through. And the reason why there is this failure of Arab states to act is in some cases, so it's partly because they're dependent on the US. So all of these regimes, not Turkey, but all of these regimes, Arab regimes, they are, they're authoritarian regimes. They're not democratic. They are relying mainly to stay in power through repression, and they also rely on the US for weaponry, but also they rely on the US and the international community more broadly, other donors, for money in order to keep their economies afloat. Egypt was in serious economic strife last year before October. The economy was on the brink of collapse, and it's in fact the events in October that provided a lifeline for Egypt because of Egypt's pivotal position in the region and a key Western ally. Then donors stepped in because they don't want to see the Egyptian regime collapsing at a point when there's this very dangerous conflict going on in Israel-Palestine. So And then there's also the aspect of so even though, like you sort of characterized it as Sunni majority countries versus Shia majority countries, what have you, but I think that's quite a reductive way in a way to think about it, because
Is it quite an obtuse way of looking at it?
yeah, because I don't think that the differences between these states are on the basis of religious doctrine. They're geopolitical interests, basically, and the Gulf states, the Arab Gulf states, are very afraid of Iranian influence, of Iranian dominance. Iran is a big country in comparison to the Arab Gulf states. So this is about them. So there's been a shift over the last couple of decades towards seeing Iran as the main threat and not Israel.
There you go, Nicola. We need to leave it there, but I'm very grateful for your amazing analysis and insights and your point of views. Always grateful for that. Thanks for coming up on this program for the first time. Looking forward to having you back in the future. And also, of course, Yossi Rappaport as well. Delighted to have you on the program. Thank you both for your time. And we're looking forward to having you back in the future. Thanks, everyone. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1 FM.
If you are in a desperate situation, ask Allah. If you are in a financial crisis, ask Allah Azza wa Jal.
Do you have a legal problem? Are you trying to settle a family member? If so, then contact M&K Solicitors. M&K Solicitors are a leading local firm specializing in immigration, family, personal injury, clinical negligence, civil and property law. Our solicitors have over 20 years' experience and are recognized internationally. Our success rate speaks for itself. Take advantage of our free consultations for your first meeting. We also give free advice on Fridays, no appointment needed. That's right, free legal advice. M&K Solicitors. Call 01582 732 503.
How many times have you needed urgent medical supplies but don't know where to go? At Harris Pharmacy, we take pride in delivering a high-level healthcare to our community. This is why we have services such as private one-to-one consultation, free prescription ordering from GP and delivery to your home, mobility aids such as providing wheelchairs and many other items for everyday use. Call us today on free phone 0800 458 2850 to discuss your medical needs. We are open from 9 a.m. till 7 p.m. Monday to Friday and 9 a.m. till 4 p.m. on Saturdays. Harris Pharmacy, 165 A B, Dunstable Road, Luton.
Attention drivers. Need new tyres? Ranger Tyres has got you covered with our tyre fitting service. Plus, our mobile tyre fitting brings the shop to you. But that's not all. We offer MOTs, wheel alignment, vehicle servicing and repairs, TPMS diagnostics, and replacement batteries, exhausts, brakes, air conditioning regassing, and number plates. Call 0800 999 2123 or visit rangertyres.co.uk for bookings. Ranger Tyres, the one-stop shop for all your vehicle needs.
ग्रेस्टोन सॉलिसिटर्स जो कानूनी मामला को सुलझाने, आपका हक दिलवाने, आपको हर तरह का तहफ़्फ़ुज़ फराहम करने और बेहतरीन नताइज हासिल करने में मुखलसाना हर मुमकिन कोशिश करते हैं। मसला कोई भी हो, इमिग्रेशन, एम्प्लॉयमेंट, फैमिली लॉ, पर्सनल इंजरी, मेडिकल नेग्लिजेंस, सिविल लिटिगेशन एंड हाउसिंग, इमिग्रेशन मसाइल को सुलझाने के लिए ग्रेस्टोन सॉलिसिटर्स पेश कर रहे हैं फ्री इमिग्रेशन ड्रॉप इन क्लिनिक्स हर जुमे। टेलीफोन 01582 343 453, एड्रेस 275 Dunstable Road, Luton, LU4 8BS। कानूनी मसाइल में इंसाफ के लिए आके हम सफर।
Losing a loved one, especially a mother or a father, could mean losing access to safety, education, and shelter. We here at Crisis Aid believe that children in the world deserve a better chance at life. Your small donation can influence a big change. Donate today. www.crisisaid.org.uk/orphan fund or call our donations line 0333 305 5000.
Would you like to be part of Luton's leading community radio station that has a growing global following
the answer is yes, then we at Inspire FM are always looking for help in various departments, from admin to editing material to presenting. Interested? If so, come and join the Inspire FM family and help us to be bigger, better and brighter. Contact us by calling 01582 481 822, text us 075 35 355 578, or email us info@inspirefm.org. Inspire FM, your radio station for the community, by the community.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7 o'clock.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to part 3 of tonight's edition of Friday Night Live on Friday, the 4th of October, 2024. I'm your host, Abdul Akbar, and we're beaming out to the good people of Luton and surrounding areas tonight, and also to the good people of Sheffield, Nottingham, Derby, Peterborough, and the Midlands through our partner stations across the nation. Wow, what a crazy week is happening right now. Of course, Iran's leader has defended strikes on Israel in a rare public speech. The country's supreme leader described the attack as the minimum punishment for Israel for what he called Israel's astonishing crimes while leading Friday prayers in the capital, something he's not done for a good 4 years. Now, Khamenei's speech came 3 days after Iran, as you all know, fired nearly 200 missiles at Israel in what it said was retaliation for the assassination of Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah. Now, of course, the Farsi-speaking supreme leader delivered part of his speech in Arabic to address Palestinian and Lebanese supporters. What's going on, listeners? 01582 481822. Do you think, is anyone out there, right, Earth, ground control to the rest of the world, right, here in Inspire FM, but is anyone out there actually thinking that this is going to spark World War III? Because that's what I'm thinking. Honestly, I don't think we've had an escalation like this for a long time. I think since the first Gulf War, probably, where there was an escalation like this. But I think this is worse, because that escalation for the first Gulf War was just Iraq going into, where was it going? It was going to Kuwait, right? But this feels a little bit different. This feels that the epicenter of every kind of disaster that we could potentially imagine, we knew that if something kicked off in the land of Israel, and even some, I think, prophetic sayings, some hadith also predict it's all going to kick off from Israel. And if you're one of those people that likes to read about the end times and the signs before the day of judgment, I know a few people like that who don't get any sleep because they say it's going to be the end of the world. And they've been saying that for the past 50 years. But I don't know. Whatever the case, a lot of the hadith do suggest that it's all going to kick off from the Israeli area where the Palestinians are, the land of Palestine, now currently where Israel is hanging out. What say you? 01582 481822. I'll happy to read your texts as well on 07779 481822. But I'm going to go straight to our next guests on the program. They've been waiting patiently, and I want to introduce them as well. I'm delighted to welcome. And right now, in this part of the program, listeners, I want to get a perspective of what the rest of the Muslim world thinks about this. What's the perspective of, for example, the Pakistani government, the Turkish government, the Arab countries, Malaysia, Indonesia? What's the Muslim world response? Because we heard from Nicola Pratt just before the break that actually it's fairly muted, and there isn't much action apart from verbal, quote unquote, condemnation. But let me go to my guests on the line. If my guests are on the line, please unmute your mics, because I shall be speaking to you imminently. Delighted to welcome Saqlain Imam Saab, who's a London-based former BBC senior journalist and a current affairs analyst. He's got lots of experience in politics, media, and journalism, especially regarding Pakistan, South Asia, and the Muslim world. So, Saqlain Saab, you are perfect for this part of the program. Welcome. How are you tonight?
Yes, I'm fine, doing well. And I was really impressed to listen to Nicola Pratt's analysis. She was on the spot.
Yeah, there you go. So we'll come to you in a second. Thanks for that. And also joining us is Yasser Janjua Saab, no stranger to this program, who started his military career actually in 1990 and eventually studied at universities in the US and the UK. So lots of international exposure there. And he's a subject matter expert in security and risk management and has taught at a leading Pakistani university. So delighted to welcome you, Yasser Saab, as well. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Abdul Akbar. Thanks a lot for calling me.
Thanks for joining us. So let me start with Yusuf Khan Saab. Of course, I would love to get your perspective on the Muslim world response right now. It just feels a little bit empty. It feels like Israel can do whatever the heck it likes, whenever it likes, with very little repercussions by way of being told quite strongly, publicly, by any of its allies. Iran fires some missiles, probably way less in terms of the number of missiles Israel has perpetrated on the Palestinians and now the Lebanese people. But they're being threatened with sanctions straight away. They're being threatened by action by America straight away. There's this global condemnation from Western countries. Over to you, Saklan Saab. What's your analysis?
I think there are several factors which prohibit Muslim world to react to Israel. First of all, there is a colonial hangover that still continues to dictate their policies. They directly or indirectly, they have been under the colonial control. For instance, Pakistan or Bangladesh or Malaysia, Indonesia, and in the Middle East, all these countries, which we know as Jordan, Iraq, Egypt, Syria, they all have been under the Western countries' colonial rule. Saudi Arabia wasn't directly, but impliedly, because it was the Britain and then subsequently America which controlled the economy by exploring oil wells. So these countries are still under that system. There have been much progress, changes, of course. But on the other hand, the powerful country is a colonizer or an ally of the colonizer, that is Israel. So Israel is a colonizer in this land. It occupied the lands which it did not belong to this group of people, but they just justified on the basis of some biblical references. Now the irony is the West civilization or the European civilization, which has come to this mature age where they believe in enlightenment, secularism, and human rights, but they still justified the existence of Israel's state or state of Israel on the basis of some biblical reference, which is against their own grain. But the reason is Israel was a colonizer in this region. So that's why they supported to expand their influence in this region, which is and still is, and in the past also, full of oil and other mineral resources. So, and of course, this region, especially what we know as Middle East or West Asia, historically, if you see, it's a link between two great continents, Asia and Europe on the one hand, and Africa on the other hand. We may not appreciate this, importance of this land contact between these two great, regions, but historically Africa was pretty rich area. So there has always been a kind of, trade link through this land. So this land is very important for, anyone who wants to, conduct trade and other things. And in the modern age, it has become a great link between two great seas, which is, China, India, or all Eastern countries who want to trade with Europe or with any, African country. Mostly their trade takes place through Canal Suez. So that's important. This region is extremely important. And in this extremely important area, Israel's presence serves the interests of Europe and America. And America dominates this region through Israel. So when we talk about Israel's role and Muslims' role, they know it, that they don't like, population, people of this region who are Muslims, or even Christians. We forget the one thing, that Christians never supported Israel of this region. Even they are battered and sometimes murdered by Israeli forces, IDF, which they call themselves. and they kill Christians as well, along with Muslims. So it is not just Muslims. It's basically a process of colonization. Now, the area happens to be, inhabited by Muslims who are in majority in this region, but it's not basically a religious war. It's basically the war of occupation on the resources and geography.
Absolutely.
So, but
So,
in
let me-
this geography, the Muslim.
Gee, so hang in there for a second, Silas, because I want to come back to you and dwell more on that, because I fully agree with your analysis there, because everyone says that, for example, Hamas and Hezbollah are proxies, but actually it could be argued that Israel is a proxy for the US in a similar light as well. So Iran is instituting its agenda through its proxies, but isn't it the case that Israel is instituting and implementing the American agenda as a proxy as well? That's an interesting food for thought. So Clarence, I'll stay there because I want to go to Yasser Janjua Saab as well. And Yasser Saab, and let me ask you this, because you've got a background in the military and of course in education as well and risk management. And I want to dwell on a scenario where can you potentially see any scenario where Muslim countries like Pakistan or even the Arab world, dare I say, Malaysia, Indonesia, what will it take for these countries to get involved and speak up for the Muslim voice? Because at the moment, everyone seems quite muted, at least militarily.
Thank you very much. You've rightly pointed out that as of now, the response from the Muslim world has been very lukewarm. Arab League has called in a meeting which has been lip service for a very long time. We've seen in last 75 years, Arab League has not been up to the mark in condemning Israelis. However, I want to stop here for a moment and say this, because I know that you've got listeners inside UK and in Luton who are not just Muslims. So I or Mr. Saklan should not give an impression that because we, the analysts who are on your program, being Muslims, we are biased. The fact remains, keeping our biases aside, if on the October 7th last year, what happened, I frequently come on I must say, enemy channels. Most of them Indian channels. I come almost 2-3 times a week, and I say to them, I must condemn what Hamas did in Israel on October 7th. There's no defense for that. But what Israel has been doing after that, 100,000 people have been killed, and the international community is sitting mum on that, is absolutely appalling. And most of the blame should go to America, because America has been taking sides with Israel and protecting it. It has sent its military vessels there in the region to support Israel, and it's showing its power that it's side of Israel. If America or President Biden had taken a very strong stance on day one, today what Iran has done should not have happened. It wouldn't have happened. If a two-state solution was arrived at or was discussed in serious terms, today we would not be on the brink of a war, which looks, as a matter of fact, if Iran continues, there's been a second attack by Iran on Israel again today. So it looks like Iranians are not backing off. And if I was them, I would say, yes, they're doing the right thing, because the rest of the Muslim world is sitting mum. So you expect the Iranians, and from a Muslim's perspective, apparently, they're Shias and Palestinians are Sunnis. So they should be least bothered about the rights of Palestinians, right? But they have stood up being Muslim. And we, the Sunnis, we are sitting mum. It's unfortunate. And it's all lip service. Now, I mean, countries like Pakistan, Malaysia, and all those countries that can rally around, but the leadership role has to come from the GCC. So we should rally around and create an atmosphere whereby we create a pressure group and talk about that this Israeli aggression has not only destroyed Palestine or Gaza, they say it will take 15 years just to clear the debris that has been left there in last 1 year. 15 years to remove the debris. Gaza Strip is completely debris. So, and now they've had the cheeks to do it in Lebanon as well. They did it. They killed Ismail Hania inside Iran, and they did not stop. Iranians showed restraint, did not respond after Ismail Hania, and they went for Hassan Nasrallah.
Yeah, something
Where
is
will they stop?
absolutely. As I said, I hear the passion in your voice, and it's deeply disturbing. But your point about 100,000 people plus civilians killed, women and children killed, is unprecedented. So it's really interesting how the Israeli government likes to paint the picture of the largest attack since the Holocaust is what the 7th of October is, what they claim it was. At the same time, they have done something 100-fold that to the Palestinian people in their response to October 7th. And you're quite right in that, you know, this whole situation predates October 7. Everyone wants to take October 7 as the the pivot, but actually it's not. It's been going on for decades before that, as we all know, and it's absolutely ridiculous. I just wonder, Yasser Saab, and let me take this and introduce our next guest on the line before I go back to both of you other gentlemen as well. But I wonder what the world's reaction would be if Iran happened to kill 100,000 Jews. Yeah, 100,000 Jews. What would the world's reaction be then? And that's a very interesting bit of thought there. But let me go to my next guest, Said Mohsen Abbas Saab. He's a journalist and political analyst and political justice activist on the line, and he's also an independent documentary producer. Said Saab, Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for joining us live on the radio here in the UK.
Thank you for inviting me.
Said Saab, I would love to have your interpretation. We're trying to understand the international Muslim response to the current actions by the Israeli government, not just in Gaza now, as we know, but also in Lebanon, and Iran's reaction to it. It seems the rest of the world is now waiting for what the strikes will be from Israel. Will Israel attack nuclear infrastructure? Will Israel attack oil infrastructure? What are they going to do in retaliation? And it seems like we're going to see a growing escalation. What's your analysis of the overall conflict and the current dynamics? And also, what do you think Israel's play is here? Are they going to be in this for the long haul? And I'm sure America maybe have given them permission to do this. What say you?
Well, basically, both Israel and the Anglo-Zionist empire, led by the US, of course, is in serious free fall. Whilst everybody may look at the shiny weapons that America has, and they still have a preeminence in the world in terms of being the biggest military power, and certainly even economically, they have the clout. But what we're really seeing, the overall context of this, is the rise of the Eurasian Axis, number one. So the rise of China as a serious rival, the de-dollarization process, the Russian opting out of the Western establishment, and the full-on war that's kicked off there, which could also very much trigger World War III. So you can see that America is clearly desperate and is grasping onto the idea of still being the unipolar entity across the world, and it's being challenged. The reality is that Chinese economy is rapidly encroaching on the US. US has $30 trillion debt that it needs to clear up. It's getting itself in more and more debt through these forever wars. And the main reason that they have any kind of support for Israel is because they need that as a depot for plunder and for ravaging resources in West Asia. That's the only reason the Americans are there, with all their multiple bases given to them freely by Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, all of them. So it's all about money. It's about economics. Israel is a means to an end for America. As far as the Israelis go themselves, they are a racist, ethno-supremacist, colonial settler state. It's the last one that's openly colonizing any nation in the world, and they are fully supported by the European supremacists, the Anglosphere, Britain, America, EU, Germany, etc., counting all of them. And they're invested in this idea that all of them in some way must hold on to West Asia because it has the oil, it has the gas, and it has many, many other mineral resources. This is what's at the heart of the issue. As far as Israel's internal situation, they themselves have brought the situation to this level now, where economically they're collapsing. They've had over 120,000 to 150,000 illegal settlers in the north of Palestine who've now had to evacuate the area because of Hezbollah's challenge to them militarily over especially the last year. They've got the settlers down in the south near Ashkelon, etc. They've all evacuated. So you've got something like 250,000 people displaced. So those people who robbed other people's lands are now complaining that they are homeless and looking for homes. It's ironic, really, but you don't know whether to laugh or cry. And in return, what we've got is Israel has appointed the most genocidal, most racist, most fascist establishment or government since its birth. I mean, they've always been terrorists. Look at Menachem Begin, look at Yitzhak Shamir. If you look at the history of any one of their early prime minister, Ben Gurion, they were all actually members of the Irgun or the Stern Gang who were terrorists, blowing up even British soldiers and British diplomats way back in the 40s when they first usurped and took over Palestine. So we've got a history of terrorism here, and we've got the people who are inventing terrorism. And their latest iteration in the desperation to hold on, not just to hold on to Palestine, but also to keep to their Yinon plan, the Odin Yinon plan of expansionism to a greater Israel, we've got them detonating devices that are in the hands of ordinary people in Lebanon, and they enacted the biggest act of terror in the history of terrorism, as far as I can.
Yeah, it really is disgusting. I guess if you speak to them, they'll say they were going after, Hezbollah operatives and, everybody else's collateral damage. But you and I know that is a violation of all kinds of rules of engagement and war as well, given the civilian numbers that we've seen being attacked and killed from that. So let me go to Saab. Just stay there because I want to go to Saqlan Imam Saab as well, who is a London-based former BBC journalist and current affairs analyst as well. So Saqlan Saab, let me ask you this, because I like what you said before, which is, and it's very true as well, which is why I like it, because you said that a lot of the Indo-Pak countries are have this colonial hangover. They're kind of, in that mindset still. And I'm wondering, from your vantage point and your understanding of the geopolitics of the region, what will it take for Muslim countries to do something about the situation that's unfolding? Do you ever see a case where Pakistan will come to the aid of Iran if this conflict was to escalate beyond where it is today, for example?
I mean, it's very difficult for a country like Pakistan to, stand with Iran, especially when it is going to or expected to fight with Israel, which is a direct colony of the USA. And Pakistan is a US ally in this region. And in fact, Pakistan is pretty, bad situation. Financially, economically, it hasn't grown, and it has also some law and order issues. It created some, gangs of mujahideen, which are now attacking the state. So there's a serious problem for Pakistan. But, the issue is not that how can Pakistan or how any other country. The issue is basically fundamentally, from my point of view, is that the Muslims have never, progressed to that level where they could challenge the West. And the forces in Muslim countries who claim to be, challenger of the West are religious clerics. This is very different situation. In Iran, a cleric's role is you could say, imperialism. It has been there for the last centuries or 2 centuries. But in countries like Pakistan, barring a few groups of religious clerics, most of them have been pro-state or even pro-Britishers. And this has been the case in other Muslim countries as well. So the problem with the Muslims is or the population of these Muslim countries or the Muslim majority countries is that their rulers are under the control of imperial forces, which is the USA and Europe, or what you say Anglo-American, cabal, and the people are under the control of their clerics who are not anti-imperialism or anti-imperialist. Very few of them are anti-imperialist. So there's no political vision or religious vision how to fight or liberate themselves from the clutches of the imperialism. So that is a major problem. And they have to have this kind of, basically, for instance, in Pakistan, it is said that Maulana Maududi was a leader with vision to fight against, powers. But actually, if you go and study his books, he never condemned American imperialism. He never condemned. He was used by Americans to as a tool against socialism.
Yeah,
that was his main contribution. Of course, that was good for America, and they used it. But on the other hand, overall Muslim intellectuals or Muslim clerics who led political movements, such as Sayyid Qutb or Hassan al-Banna, or in some other countries, people like them, they actually were never anti-imperialism. They never had a vision. For instance, after the demise,
I think you may open up another can of worms, depending on the opinion people hold about these clerics and thought leaders of Pakistan. But we're going to take a very short break. But let me just thank Yasser Janjawal's contributions on this program, because Yasser Saab, I know it's late in Pakistan, so you're going to have to go. But Said Saab and Saqlain Saab, stay there, because we're going to be back with you after these messages. Stay tuned, everyone. Don't go away.
Thank you.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1 FM.
Why do Tops Pizza deliver the top pizzas in Luton and Dunstable?
For a start, all the toppings are 100% halal, and Tops use fresh dough every day. Then there's the cheese, the highest quality available. And when it comes to food preparation, cleanliness is taken as part of our faith. So that just leaves the taste, choice, and great offers, including buy one, get one free on all medium, large, and extra large pizzas. Tops Pizzas, Wellington Street, LU1 5AA. Order online, topspizza.com, or via Just Eat. Download our app or call 01582 72 5000.
For expert legal advice and support, talk with Luton's leading solicitors. Hannah Solicitors.
This one here could be it.
Conveyancing, wills and probate.
Edward something or other. It's just there on the right hand side.
Legal matters that matter to you. Our experienced legal team are here to help you through every step of the way. Call 01582 329 069. That's 01582 329 069. Or click on hannahsolicitors.co.uk. Hannah Solicitors. Professional advice with a tailored approach.
आजकल आपके दरवाजे पर मुख्तलिफ चीजें फरोख्त करने के बहाने और मुख्तलिफ कंपनियों का नाम इस्तेमाल करके चोर आपके घर के अंदर दाखिल होने की कोशिश करते हैं। इसलिए होशियार रहें और दरवाजा खोलने से पहले इस बात की तसल्ली कर लें कि दस्तक देने वाले से आप और आपका घर महफूज है। इंस्पायर एफएम कम्युनिटी अवेयरनेस मैसेज।
Are you thinking of starting a podcast or looking to give your podcast a new home? Why not hire Inspire FM's dedicated recording studio? With rates starting at just £25 per booking, our podcast studio is a fully functional, acoustically treated space for up to 4 people, and it's set up and ready to use as soon as you arrive. For more information or to inquire about booking, email us at info@inspirefm.org or send us a DM on our social media accounts at InspireFM Luton.
Biscard Pharmacy, your one-stop health and beauty pharmacy in Luton, stockist of over 8,000 health and beauty products. At Biscard Pharmacy, we offer a range of services, including health advice and repeat prescriptions for collection and delivery to your home. We also offer a Hajj and Umrah vaccination. Come in and see us and ask about our Stop Smoking service. We're open 7 days a week till late, including bank holidays. Biscard Pharmacy, 157A Biscard Road, Luton. Call 457709.
Every day, millions of people face life-threatening challenges. War, disaster, hunger. The need for your support has never been greater. At Action for Humanity, we believe in the power of compassion. Around the globe, we provide life-saving aid and long-term support to communities in crisis. Already, you've empowered us to reach 15 million people since 2011. Visit actionforhumanity.org or call us on 0161 860 0163 today.
Arise the Success Show is based on a prophetic model where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ nurtured the personalities of the Sahabas or the companions and nurtured their talents that Allah has created them with in order for them to succeed and for them to be our role models as well. Similarly, in the Arise to Success Show, I aim to highlight inspiring individuals and their journeys to success to be our role models too, as well as to inspire the Muslim community.
Every Monday from 6 p.m.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7:30.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the fourth and final part of tonight's edition of Friday Night Live on Friday, the 4th of October, 2024. I'm your host, Abdul Akbar, and we're beaming out to the good people of Luton and surrounding areas tonight, and also to the good people of Sheffield, Nottingham, Derby, Peterborough, and the Midlands through our partner stations across the nation. Welcome to all of you. Wow, what a crazy week it's been. We're talking about the Middle East crisis right now and all the indiscriminate bombings the Israelis have been carrying out, the Israeli government specifically has been carrying out in southern Beirut, clearly extending the remit outside of Gaza and now into the Lebanese territory, but not just Lebanon. It sounds like they're also going to go into Iran very, very shortly. Why? Because in case you don't know, it's Rosh Hashanah, which is the Israeli or the Jewish New Year. And so a lot of people have been celebrating that, albeit in muted circumstances in Israel. And the rumor has it that Israel will take its major action against Iran after Rosh Hashanah, which has actually ended this evening in Israel. So what happens next is going to be very interesting, and the action that Israel takes. And the question on everyone's mind, especially if you're into these types of conflicts, is will Israel attack Iran in terms of its nuclear infrastructure, or will Israel attack Iran in terms of its oil and hit it economically, or will it do something else? Well, talking about this topic and more, I'm delighted and very lucky to be joined by a number of very important guests. We're going to be welcoming a Turkish guest on this program as well in a moment. I'm going to give him a moment while he sets up, but I am already joined by some wonderful guests as well. And thank you, my special thanks to Sayyid Mohsen Abbas Saab, a political analyst, and also Saqlain Imam Saab, who is on the line from the last part of tonight's program as well. Let me go to you, Sayyid Saab, if I may. Thanks for hanging on with us. Sayyid Saab, what say you? What do you think will be the Israeli response? I know this is kind of asking you to forecast something that nobody can really second guess, but from your experience of recent Israeli strikes, do you feel like Israel will take action that will escalate this war, knowing that Iran has used rhetoric? For example, even today, the supreme leader has said that they will take even stronger action if Israel takes strong action. Do you think it's intended to exacerbate this conflict, whatever Israel does? Over to you, Sayyid Saab.
Bibi Netanyahu and his government have done nothing but try to escalate long before October the 7th. But let's just take it from the 7th of October. They've made no effort to resolve the issue through hostages. They've scuppered virtually every ceasefire effort that has gone on. Hamas, etc., have agreed, more or less agreed on terms and conditions several times. But every time there's been either an escalation or something that's been done from the Israeli government, which has made sure that that ceasefire doesn't happen. So basically, I mean, in Congress, you'd have noticed when Netanyahu went to Congress, he mentioned Iran 25 times in a speech which he was given. I think half of the time was spent with people giving him a standing ovation for genociding 40 to 180,000 Gazans, depending on whether you listen to the Lancet report or the other figures. So here's a man who the US Congress basically clapped, and he was only talking about Iran. And every time he pulls out his little graphs at the United Nations, he always talks about the cursed people in the area and the blessed people this time. And the blessed ones were the ones who were lackeys of the Anglo-Zionist Empire. He mentioned Egypt. He actually outed the guys who are basically acting essentially as traitors to the oppressed. So Saudi Arabia, are good. Jordan is good. Egypt is good. Anybody that complies with the Israeli agenda is good. And Iran is on the top of the list of those who are cursed. So yes, I mean, I would have thought, based on the trajectory that he's been going and the drumbeat for war that he's been desperate for, he is almost hell-bent on doing it. His purpose for doing this was really because he knows Israel on its own can't deal with the axis of resistance. And if he doesn't deal with the axis of resistance now, he understands that Iran's technological advancement is so rapid, they're able to now fire hypersonic missiles, something even Israel apparently doesn't have. We'll find out. But apparently only China, Russia, and Iran have hypersonic missiles. Hypersonic missiles are not ballistic missiles. Ballistics are things that go up into the air and they come back down in a certain trajectory that you can guess or you can work out through physics. These are guided missiles which have the ability to change direction, especially at the last moment when they arrive at their targets. So Iran has essentially a superior strike capability now. Now, if Israel tries to attack with ballistic missiles or even using nukes, those are all trackable by radar. It's unclear to what extent Russia and China have also facilitated Iran with defense mechanisms. We don't know the full scale of Iranian defense mechanisms, although it's said that they have their own indigenously developed mechanisms which are equivalent to the S-400, S-300 that the Russians have. So with the 150, 200,000 plus rockets and missiles which Hezbollah has, you can only begin to imagine what Iran had stored away, because they would have been preparing for a war with the US ever since 1979. And what they've got up their sleeves makes it almost irrelevant what Israel does, because if Israel does decide to go on an option of attacking sites which go above and beyond what Iran is willing to tolerate, they can hit back extraordinarily hard. And Israel ultimately, I think at its shortest point, is not more than 20 or 30 kilometers wide. It has Tel Aviv and Dimona sites, Haifa, all of which are mapped out by the Iranians, all of which are within hypersonic missile and ballistic missile capabilities. So what we would see is essentially a decimation. And this is the Iranians have said. They said, look, if you do it, and fine, it's in their strategy outline that Israel, if it does, they've got a plan for what happens. And they've said it very clearly. We will utterly smash your infrastructure. They've made that absolutely clear. And the fact that they hit Nevatim Air Base, they hit the Mossad headquarters in Tel Aviv, 2 or 3 other sites, they're not bluffing. They can do what they say.
And they can do what they say. And my analysis, and correct me here if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but my analysis here is that Iran intentionally didn't want to hit civilian areas in those 200 or so missiles, because if they did, they would have. They were actually going after military targets, like I would argue a responsible response would have been. And so Iran is actually taking an escalatory path, albeit in steps. And, a major step would be to attack civilian areas. But it's clear to anyone who knows about rules of war that you don't do that as a first step. You go after military versus military, which is clearly what they tried to do. That's why we saw pictures of Israeli children standing on Iranian missiles in the desert, because that's what their intended target was. It was military installations. I'm curious to know your response to that in a minute. But Said, I'll stay there. Zaklan Saab, stay there as well. But I want to welcome to our program another special guest who's dialing in as an expert on Turkish and German relations. He is Associate Professor Dr. Anis Bayrakli. Dr. Anis, thank you so much for joining us on the program on Friday Night Live. And you're currently the head of the Department of Political Science and International Relations at the Turkish German University. And let me ask you, Dr. Anis, is that university in Turkey or is it in Germany?
It is in Istanbul.
It's in Istanbul. Okay, fantastic.
In Istanbul, It's a bilateral university established by Turkey and Germany together.
Amazing. Amazing. Thanks for sharing that. So let me ask you,
Thank you.
Dr. Enis, in terms of the international response and condemnation, we've had a lot coming out of President Erdogan as well. I think Erdogan has been very vocal, not just about the current situation and escalation we're seeing towards Beirut and Lebanon, but also in Gaza, and also before October 7th. President Erdogan has been very vocal, no doubt about that. We had another guest on the line before you joined earlier on tonight's program. She was a professor of politics in the Middle East from the University of Warwick in the UK. And she was saying we've heard a lot of rhetoric come out of a lot of the Muslim leaders, including President Erdogan, but that's about it. We're hearing vocal condemnation, but we're not seeing any action. And in fact, she suggested that Turkey is still trading with Israel, and all the normal motions of trade are still happening. What's your interpretation of the Turkish response to the current action by Israel?
Well, I mean, as far as I know, Turkey has cut all the economic relations with Israel. But of course, there are some allegations that there is still some trade going on behind the scenes. But these are allegations. But as far as we know, this trade has been stopped, I think 4 or 6 months ago. I don't remember exactly. But when it comes to countering Israel, this has to be a common effort from the Muslim world. And when we look at this Muslim world, we see that it's divided. It cannot act, together against Israel. There are also some regimes in the Muslim world who are supporting Israel and who are more pro-Israel than actually Israel itself. So this is a huge problem. So I think Turkey is doing everything it can, but you cannot really compare Iran with Turkey, because Turkey and Iran is totally different in different leagues. Turkey is part of NATO, is part of the international system. On the other hand, Iran is, you can say, it's not inside the system. It's acting outside the system. And of course, there are differences, quite big differences here. So, but when it comes to putting pressure on Israel, I think Turkey is doing what it can. I mean, stopping this trade was a big deal for Turkey because it's going through a huge economic crisis. Even countering Israel in rhetoric terms, not many leaders in the Muslim world, but also in the world, has done the same as the President Erdogan. Also, Turkish media, TV channels, Anadolu Agency, Turkish official agency, and also Turkish other TV channels, they have been both in Israel, but also some were in Gaza. They were documenting the crimes of Israel. And also Turkey has joined the court case against Israel in the International Criminal Court. So I think these were big, important steps. And also Turkey was trying to put diplomatic pressure on Israel by, building an alliance, international alliance. But we have to understand that we are living in a global apartheid system. Israel sees itself above the international law, and it is protected by the United States. It's giving all the protection, financial help, military aid from the United States. It's limitless. And that's why Netanyahu, but also previous Israeli governments, they do not really care about international norms or international law. And there is no limit what they can do in the Middle East. I mean, they can attack Israel. So who will stop them?
Yeah, I hear you.
Only Iran. They have nuclear weapons. Israel has nuclear weapons. Do we really think if Israel uses nuclear weapons somewhere in the Middle East that it will be held accountable? I'm not sure. Even if. So that's a huge problem. That's not only our problem. Muslim world's problem. It's the problem of the whole world. But of course, because we are living in this global apartheid system, the West doesn't really care, and they imposed this system on the world. And now we are trying to trying to help the Palestinians, but there are limitations. We have to
It's
also
interesting,
understand this.
Dr. Anis, it's interesting what you say, because the only country in the world to use a nuclear bomb so far is the US, right? They're
Yes.
hardly going to keep Israel to account if Israel was to hit the trigger as well, because they are guilty of using a nuke themselves, which they're preventing everybody else from using as well, which is
No,
a
I
great
mean,
hypocrisy, right?
the fact that they have nuclear weapons now, they should
Mm.
be held accountable for this because it's against international agreements. But they do not, acknowledge, they do not announce that they have these nuclear weapons. Neither they deny it, but everybody knows they have it.
Absolutely, they do, and the fact they don't deny it is an indication. Just like the pager attack they did just a couple of weeks ago, they never actively denied it, but it was an open secret that this was an Israeli government action
Yeah.
perpetrated on both Hezbollah members, but also innocent civilians who were just disregarded as usual, sadly, by the Israeli government, who doesn't seem to care about civilian casualties to the extent that international rigor and rules of war demands them to care about. So it's a real dangerous situation. Thank you for that,
Yeah.
Dr. Anis. Stay there. 'Cause I
Yeah,
wanna
so
come-
I just want to add that also rhetoric is really important. I mean that Israel had this, in the international, media had this, let's say, they were shaping the narrative about Gaza, but the fact that Erdogan has called it as a genocide, as the leader of a NATO country, and the president of Turkey, I think it has a huge impact. Yeah, that we break this, the Israeli superiority in the narrative side, especially in the Western media. It's also important, and that drives the Israeli government crazy. I think.
I agree with that, because I think President Erdogan is probably the only leader of a Muslim country that is really speaking quite concretely and directly about he's calling the situation out for what it is. And a lot of other countries and their leadership, so-called leaders of Muslim countries, are not doing that. Yes, there is condemnation. And whilst many people listening to this program, and maybe even yourselves as my guests, will say that Saudi Arabia is not being as forthright in terms of its disapproval of what's going on. Their foreign minister, I was watching an interview that he gave after the UN meeting last week, when all the world leaders were there. He was very clear as well. He was very direct, and I think he was very clear about Saudi Arabia's position regarding Israel and Palestine and Lebanon, etc. And it sounded very, very positive. But the fact is what the leaders are saying on camera, is that being realized behind the scenes, or is there some other agenda at play? Because it seems like what they are saying is not being backed up by actions, and that's what really makes a difference, right? Said Sab, you want to come in before I bring in
Yes, because I may have to nip away at 8 o'clock for a few minutes. If you need me longer than that, I can come back. But I just wanted to add into this, to do a quick sweep of the Muslim countries is very important, because the first thing is that people in the West, those of us who are protesting and against all this, we have a minimal impact, because the Anglo-Zionist empire will not change its foreign policies because their interests lie in plunder and whatnot. So it's very, very hard to get Britain or any of these Western countries to change their stance. However, the Muslims need to think more carefully. The Saudis, of course, whether it's Kuwait, Qatar, all of them, they are the products of British colonialism, which of course formed them, and then it was the American imperialism which took over the management of these countries. I mean, I'm very forthright about it. These nations don't have a complete freedom of control of their foreign policies. The way that relationship works is that, of course, the dollar is linked to petrol, but actually the shots are called by the money lender mafia. Those guys who are involved with Saudi, they basically will call the shots as to where it's going. This is the problem. Until we get genuine sovereignty, genuine independence, unless the people get some say in how those places are run, rather than just monarchists and despots who are dictated to behind the scenes by Mossad, by the CIA, by the deep state of the West, you won't have unity. The whole point of the Anglo-Zionist empire has always been divide and rule. So they're doing that now. They do it through Shia versus Sunni, Wahhabi versus Sufi. They do it through Iranian versus Arab. They do it through through the nationalities and the national interests and the rivalries. And they are absolute masters at that game. So the first thing that Muslim people, I don't have any hope in the current leadership of 90% of the Muslim world to change. The change has to come from the bottom. The people themselves have to recognize that you are enslaved ultimately to a neoliberal, neocon, Zionist order. And unless you're willing to struggle for your freedom, like Iran did, Iran gave huge sacrifices under Ayatollah Khomeini and won its liberty and sovereignty at a very high price. But now the IMF doesn't have control, as my brother doctor said. The thing about Iran is it can act independently, but it acts very strategically and very thoughtfully and within the legal limits as well. Everything it's done so far is within the realm of law, international law. Even in terms of its military response, it responded not because it was firing on behalf of Gazans or Lebanese. It fired because Ismail Haniyeh was killed on Iranian sovereign territory by the Israeli Mossad agencies. That gave them absolute legitimacy to logically, rationally, legally respond. But I think that what we need really is, first of all, the Muslim people need an awakening. They need to realize they are an economic powerhouse. They need to understand that anybody who controls the central part of the world, which is where West Asia sits, basically controls power around the world. Always has done. Whether it was Genghis Khan or whether it was whichever power came into being, whoever controls this region controls the world, really. If the Muslims could wake up and follow what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said to him, he said, hold on to the rope of Allah and be not disunited. Come together, create economic federations, create military confederation. You've seen that Iran on its own, Iran, under the worst sanctions of any nation, as long as I can remember, and perhaps before, it has built an infrastructure of technology and a knowledge economy. It's designed the best drones, perhaps in the world now. They're advanced in terms of hypersonics, in terms of military technology. In their biotechnological field, they're advancing rapidly. They've got universities all across the country, and women and boys are allowed on merit to run.
Excellent points. I need to move on to Glenn Sub. Sorry to interrupt you, but amazing points. We need another program. We've done a 2-hour special today. We need another program just with you on it, so we can dissect all of this stuff, because it's a lot, and maybe with all of you individually as well. But let me go to Sir Glenn Sub, who's been waiting really patiently. We've got a few minutes left, and I want to just get some final remarks from all of you, if I can. Sir Glenn Sub, your final thoughts on this and where you think it's going next, maybe in a minute or two, if you can.
You mean the war, chances of war?
Yeah.
I think Israel at the moment, led by Netanyahu and that cabal of extremist, rightist Zionists, it is possible, very likely, that they will attack Iran. And then I see Iran will react very harshly, and Israel will be half destroyed. And then we see possibly the intervention of the USA, but not before November.
Interesting. So they're going to wait until the elections, and there's a new president in place potentially. Dr. Anis, very quickly from you, if you can.
Yeah, I think also Netanyahu will attack Iran because he wants to create some facts on the ground before the elections in the US, and of course this war will deepen in Lebanon, and Israel will pay a heavy price in South Lebanon. We are seeing this already, but also lots of Lebanese civilians will be unfortunately killed by the Israeli bombardment, and we are now approaching a regional war, a total, war of regional war. It was until now some clashes, some operations here and there, but now it's going to be a full-blown war, regional war, and it's very dangerous for everybody in the region. And in Turkey, we are also very much concerned about this because, President Erdogan, he made a speech and he described Israel as a national security threat to Turkey's unity as well. Many in Turkey think also like this because a regime like this with nuclear weapons is a problem for everybody.
It is.
And
Thank you,
it has to
Dr.
be stopped.
Thank you for that. Seitab, your final thoughts on this?
I'll agree with my colleagues that regional war is almost inevitable. And if it happens, Iran will shut down the Hormuz Strait. It will shut down Bab al-Mandeb. 30% of the energy which flows through both of those areas and the trade that goes through will be closed. And that will have a knock-on, an absolute cataclysmic effect on the economy around the world. Everybody is going to get affected and drawn into this. And the worst case scenario, of course, is that the US bases, etc., Iran would hit them wherever they are. If the Americans got involved and they launched any attacks on Iran, you would find every US base across the Middle East would be completely and utterly wiped out, as well as Israel. And it would be an all-out war, which the axis of resistance, at the end of the day, wars are won on the ground. You can't win them through missiles and ballistics and air forces. You have to occupy territory. And the axis of resistance has a very substantial fighting force on the ground. Yemeni Ansarullah, the Iraqi PMUs, add the Syrians into that, add the Iranian armed forces, over 1 million soldiers there, and combine that with the Lebanese Hezbollah. Israel, in return, has very little. And can the Americans afford to put amphibious forces into the Middle East, into West Asia? They have about 40,000 troops stationed in West Asia. Would they be able to survive in Iraq and all these places in an all-out war? Well, it remains to be seen.
There you
My
go. Well,
worry is,
sorry,
just to interrupt you,
Associate Professor Dr. Anis Merakli, and also Dr. Thank you so much for joining us on the program tonight, sharing your points of view. Of course, it's a bleak picture, but we're going to keep everyone in our prayers and hope for the best for the people of Lebanon, for Iran, and all humans, basically, who are caught up in this conflict. Until next time, listeners, this has been Friday Night Live. We'll be continuing to analyze this topic next week. Stay with us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Take care.